because this is the first time I've ever had a set of D&D dice. I was just wondering, I'm a little confused which ones I'm going to need. Will I need all of them? Will I need some of them? They're pretty.
Well, I mean, you're not going to use all of them all the time. And congratulations on getting your first set of D&D dice, or I like to call them the standard dice. It stops trademark stuff. You're always going to need the 20-sided, absolutely, right? That's the thing you're going to roll the most. Anytime you if you're a spellcaster, you're going to need more of them, but it's probably going to be 4s.
Okay,
8s and 6s.
I see 4s and 6s on mine. So the 4 is this one? Right?
Yes. Yeah, you got
and
that.
And then the 6 is the obvious.
Right.
Regular, yeah.
The one everybody knows.
Cool. And then am I going to need the one with all the 10s?
Probably not. Mostly you're going to need those other dice for damage dice. And I don't think you use any damage dice. That might change as your character goes up in level. So.
Okay, cool.
So why does that dice have 10s on it?
Because Pathfinder 2nd Edition doesn't do this, but some games allow you to roll percentile. And so you can get the one with the 10s and the one without the 10s, or you can just designate one color or whatever, and you can do a D100. So I just roll a 44. And so if
you wanted to get a 1 to 100 result, the first die takes the place of the 10s place. So it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, right? And then the other one takes the place of the 1s place. When you roll them together, it gives you a combined like 78, 64.
Okay, so these two that are both shaped like this.
Correct. Yep. They're both 10-sided dice. One is just tooled to be the 10s, and one is tooled to be the 1. To get a roll of 100 in this configuration, at least the American way to get a roll of 100, you have to roll double aught on the one die and a single aught on the other. And by getting zeros across the board, that is a result of 100, which I understand our British gaming counterparts do a little differently.
Well, so some stupid dice lore is once upon a time there weren't any 10-sided dice, and that's because they're not platonic solids. They're one of the dice that aren't platonic solids. And so 20-sided dice, when they first came out, had 1 to 0 on each side. And so they were basically there to roll 10, or you used to fill in the numbers with crayon. Some people would do it in 2 different color crayons to do a D20. But it wasn't until later, we're talking about the 70s here, right? Ancient history.
Right.
That dice with 1 to 20 came out, because that's just not the way they did it back then. They were actually looking for percentile dice using a platonic solid. And so they used the 20-sided die for that.
And platonic solids are what?
Platonic solids are shapes.
D20 from the original box set that I colored in half of it. So
that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
Platonic solids are, and my Plato is a little bit rusty, but basically they were perfect forms according to Plato because they're symmetric, or somewhat symmetric in the case of the D4. And Plato basically thought everything was constructed in some way with Platonic solids.
Are all Platonic solids even-sided, or are there any odd-sided Platonic solids?
Well, the 4. The 4 is kind of it's symmetric. Kind of. I think it was just there because the Greeks loved triangles.
I see. And since we're on the subject of 4-sided dice, for new players who aren't savvy with the 4-sided die situation, there have been 2 incarnations of the 4-sided die. One of them has the numbers at the flat and long base of the 4. So when you roll it and it sits flat on the ground, as you spin it around, the number at the bottom of the die should be the same on all faces. That's how many of them are manufactured today. The other version is the opposite, where the number that you roll is on the point side. So whatever's pointing up, as you spin it around, you can see the same number on all 4. We were recently talking
Can I show off my magical 4-sided dice?
Sure.
Your magic 4-sides?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I got these 4-sided dice created specifically for me, and they have nothing but the number 4 on them. in every position.
Those are cheater
Because I
dice.
thought it was fun. Because I thought it was funny, huh?
Yes.
Cheater
They're what?
dice.
Yes.
Cheater.
Of course, yes.
We
Yeah,
call them.
It's not cheating. It's like they have fours on them. I'm not lying. I'm telling you.
No.
They
They're
just
not
have
cheater
bigger
dice.
fours on
They're not cheater dice. They're maximized. They're maximized magic missile dice.
True.
Right. What Azmyth said.
Yeah. If you want to roll a maximized
What did you
magic
roll?
missile, that's what you roll. If you really need to roll those dice, that's how you do it.
It's like Mario Party.
Cheater.
Dice and everything.
So, what other kind of historical tidbits can you share with us about dice that people may not know?
The oldest board game that we know about is called the Royal Game of and it uses four-sided dice to roll the pieces around. So some of the oldest dice are actually four-sided and six-sided. The Romans and the Egyptians used 20-sided dice. There's samples in various museums. They have weird symbols that I don't think have been translated. They're probably used for some kind of divination or whatever. But dice games have been around.
What they used to make them out of? What they used to make the dice out of back in the day?
Bone. That's one of the reasons why we have knuckle bone. Is sometimes they'd use the knuckle bone and craft it into dice. Roll the bones. Wood, gemstones. In fact, the 20-sided. Or at least hard stone, polished stone in some way. The 20-sideds that we have in museums from antiquity are usually made of a hard polished stone.
Nice. Do you know on the oldest example of the board game with the four-sided die? Do you know if they were numbers up or numbers down on those four-sided dice? Do you know which variety they used?
I've only seen it, sort of recreations made it, and I didn't pay that much attention. There's this wonderful guy, Finkel, I think his name is. There is a wonderful video. Where he's actually playing the Royal Game of and it's a delight to watch.
How fun!
And they're using four-sided dice in that, but of course, it's let's see. God, he's Irving Finkel. Yeah, I got the name right. He's like a director of antiquities in the UK. He's this bearded fella with a wonderful sense of humor, and he reads cuneiform and everything else. But Tom Scott versus Irving Finkel, the Royal Game of playthrough, and it's a delight to watch. Yeah, and they use four-sided dice, but I didn't pay close attention to what form of them they were.
So, last but not least, the red-headed stepchild of the polyhedron
the
gotta be the D12s,
right?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of use for them in many of the modern games. The barbarian uses their hit points, and great weapons will sometimes use a D12 for damage.
Dice.
I think it's sad. I think it's sad how they've been kind of pushed into the corner. I remember at some point someone released D12 shaped four-sided dice, where 1 through 4 was repeated on them 3 times, so you could roll. And the idea is they roll better than little pyramids, so you get better probability, whatever that means.
That's why I wanted to make a spell that was just called, it was like a 4th level spell, just called the Dozens, and it just inflicted 3d12 damage on an enemy, just so you had an excuse to use 12-sided dice.
Steven, are you doing anything different with dice in Delve than in other tabletop RPGs?
For the most part, no. Part of the reason why, and so just about every game that I helped either develop or design, from 3.5 on to Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Delve, the 12-sided die was always a combination. How do we use these more, and everything else? The biggest problem is it's very variable, right? It seems cool, but you can roll a 1 to a 12, and over time, like when you roll a 12, it feels great, and when you roll a 1, it feels downright shitty. And that's one of the reasons why you see multiple dice for spells and stuff like this, and not a lot of 12. It's sort of to balance that curve, especially on damage. Designers are always worried about like the curve on damage, and having too many D12s in there always sort of wrecks that curve because of the variance of the die itself. That's one of the reasons why you never see a D20 used for damage as well. And why it's actually the D20 is really great for resolution rolls because of that variance, right? You never know what you're going to get. And that feels right and everything else. But psychologically for damage, you want to have an expectation there. And the larger the die gets, or if you're not using a dice pool for damage, you have less of a you can have these awesome, fantastic results, but they don't happen very much. And if you roll low, you just don't feel like you've got the potential that even if you end up rolling, 3 12s and get 3s on every one of them, you're just like, well, that was lame. So
it's like when you crit and roll 1s, you're like, well, what was that for?
Right. And so there's a probability aspect to it, and there's also a psychological aspect to it.
I find it really interesting that in the modern era of DIY dice making and such, there was for a while there was a movement towards balance and mathematical perfection and dice that were precision cut and all these kind of weighted and salt tested, and there's all that kind of nonsense.
Science dice.
It's all that kind of pseudoscience nonsense stuff. But now we're in an age of everyone has got all these custom dice with little skulls in them and shells, and people are submerging all kinds of things in them. And it seems like the idea of the perfect balance die, that's gone by the way of the dodo.
I'm still using like my old crystal dice from like the 80s.
Crystal. That's a great example of dice that were trying to be more shaped and more mathematical. More the shapes were more consistent across the board in both weight and in size. So I just find it very interesting now that we're in kind of this boutique-y sort of thing. Dice have become a multi-million-dollar industry. There are these dragon dice, which are going out on Kickstarter right now, that are like $50 a set for plastic. Like it's mind blowing.
And you can get custom ones with nothing but 4s on them. So the other thing I heard about these, because these solve 2 problems for me, because these are both funny and dangerous. Because these are the sharp ones that are like caltrops. You just throw these things out, you could ain't nobody gonna run after you with this. You'll hurt yourself.
Nice.
Great. I love them.
Nice.
I think also too, just like as a newer player, I was kind of looking around at different places for different sets of dice, and I don't know if maybe it was easier before all of this, but I find that it's kind of hard to find like some nice like quality dice right now. Like I was kind of looking around and I couldn't find anything that was like, I mean, like you said, it's just all like cheap plastic, but it's not anything that was like impressive. Or I feel like I've in the past seen so many like beautiful sets of dice that are like so beautifully crafted, and like I don't know where they are.
Well, it's a matter of where you look. The interesting thing that I found with the game science dice, they were very big on it's the most precise dice that you have. I found because I get geeky about this stuff, I did the studies of multiple rolls, and the things, they weren't any more or less precise as the other dice. And what really sells to people, I think, is finding that perfect dice set. Right. The fact that, gamers end up with, by the time that they're, either stop gaming or drop dead, right? They've got so many dice in the house. And like, I've got so many dice in the house. It's like, oh, because those dice are cool. Oh, those dice are cool. Oh, those dice are cool. Right. You're always looking for the perfect set. And because they're a set of dice and you end up losing them, you're like, oh, my perfect set of dice now doesn't have a D4. I better go look for another perfect set of dice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a time where every time I would start a new campaign, not this year, certainly, but every time I would start a new campaign, I would go out and I would buy a new set of dice, and I would have that dice for that campaign, and I'd have them all separated out. And I've lost that path. I don't do that anymore. They all go in the big bag. Everything goes in the big bag. So
for me, it was always going to it was tradition to go get a new dice set at every game convention. I would say.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's why I wind up with
nice.
That
A
much
big bag.
This is one of them.
A big basket.
Yeah.
I think
Basket
out
of
of
dice.
all of them, for mainstream dice, Chessex remain my favorite. to this day. You can get much more expensive. You can go artisan level dice. You can do all that kind of stuff. But I believe that just as the mainstream dice provider, ChessX has always been my favorite. So you might want to look there. I appreciate everybody talking about dice and riffing on it as a little bonus content for us today.
Yeah, thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, this kind of leads into a little something that we've got planned in the future. It won't necessarily be with our play group each time. In fact, it'll probably be a very different gathering of folks. But we are going to be launching another side show like we've done with the Summoning Circle. We're going to call it Alignment Deniers, and it is going to be roundtable rifting and conversations just like this with industry professionals, with game writers and reviewers, with people in the know, veteran players, and people like you. There'll be an opportunity for you to win in a spot and visit on Alignment Deniers and get involved with those conversations. So as always, we appreciate you so much, Arbusters. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, spread the word far and wide. Thank you. Bye.